Hello again, and welcome to this podcast by the Light Review. And I'm more than happy to be back with Steve Saville from Clevertronics. Hello, Steve. How are you today?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm wearing a jumper because just in case anybody's wondering where we are in the world when they watch this, it's February, it's 2021, and it's sub-zero outside.
Absolutely.
Okay, you're obviously in a very nice warm place because you're just in open shirt collar there. Yeah,
Absolutely.
excellent.
I'll put the heating on, don't worry.
Yeah. Right. When we spoke last, we ended up the conversation saying that the thing that we flagged up from that sort of introductory chat was this idea that we really need to talk about system design when it comes to emergency lighting, rather than just picking a fitting. One of the things that I've realized coming in the news today is there's a report, and this is all post-Grenfell stuff, of course it is, but the London Fire Brigade have been investigated by government in lieu of Grenfell to say how they can do better when it comes to high-rise buildings.
Mm.
And everyone's disappointed that I think out of 29 recommendations, they've only managed to do 4. And I think this is grossly unfair because we want to talk about system design, but the fire brigade seem to be, they've been sort of put into a corner where they're having to respond to a system design that wasn't intended to do what the people want them to do. This is all about, of course, whether it's a stay put policy or whether it's an evacuation policy. Yeah. All those buildings have been designed, the system is designed to stay put. And all of the shortfalls have come in because they had some pretty shoddy work done, which breached the security of those compartments. Yeah. So I thought, well, this is all about system design. This is not just about saying, oh, we want everybody to leave the building down the same staircase as the fire brigade are coming up.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, whatever strategy you're looking at, when you're looking at fire strategies, you have to ensure you have the right systems in place and processes in place to back that strategy up. And I know people may be sort of fed up of hearing it now, but it's also making sure and double checking that you're adhering to be compliant at each step of the way when the building changes. If something changes dramatically in the standards, are you now up to date? If something changed dramatically within the building and how it's used, for instance, like you say at Grenfell, a big refurb on the construction of the building, are people addressing all those points? And it is difficult and it is complex. So I agree with you. It's a little unfair to a certain degree to then look back retrospective and say, we're going to put you on the spot specifically for this. But I suppose everybody involved in any project needs to make sure they have the key stakeholders in place so you can discuss what the strategy is and ensuring you're meeting compliance in every level. And that's the same with emergency lighting, even for the very sort of down to the brass tacks of it all of where you need emergency luminaires. Some people do designs just off the back of a drawing that's sent through in a PDF, an assumption of ceiling height.
We've all been
not quite sure. Yeah, not quite sure where fire extinguishers are and things like that. So yeah, it's all about liaising with people and communicating properly to get the right system in place for what the end user actually wants initially. So it's meeting their specification, but rather than just ticking a box on a product label or a product catalog, it's having that discussion, I think, to make sure or ensuring that you understand fully what the client is looking for and that your system or systems you're looking at to specify can deliver on that.
Yeah, again, just staying with the high-rise thing, the money that's been announced earlier this week for replacing cladding, it's not actually a replacing cladding. What am I saying? It is a replacement of cladding issue, but it's not the only issue. It's not the only thing, is it? The money that they're being provided is just for cladding. But with this new system, with this new strategy, it will involve a new approach to emergency lighting. And that could be absolutely massive, because that could also lead, in terms of policy, of putting an emergency light in every apartment.
Exactly. It depends how you're looking at the fire strategy. So you're right, it's bigger than just replacing a product that might not be deemed to be compliant for a certain type with another product that's compliant. It's how it affects the fire strategy in that entire building. Are you looking at other things? Are you going to be putting sprinklers in here where there weren't sprinklers before? Are you going to put emergency lighting in here? And if so, what you're actually looking to achieve? So it's all about that discussion.
When you sit around a project table and you look around at all the nodding dogs around the table, yeah, we agree with that. Who around that table do you expect to carry the knowledge of a fire strategy?
Well, that again is quite difficult to answer. It's a very good question. So usually there's a responsible person for a building or a premises or a project or whatever who has ultimate responsibility to ensure that they comply. But they don't have to be competent in all the different aspects, but they just have to make sure that they're employing people who are competent. So when they're looking at the entire fire strategy, they're speaking with the right people who bring that level of competency and making sure they all communicate and have a good liaising or communication network to ensure everybody delivers on what they need to then ultimately give the responsible person a compliant system. And we tend to be not very good at that part. We don't bring everybody together around the table, like you say, to make sure everybody's meeting their bits. And if people have got systems that, I don't know, interface with the systems, are they communicating correctly? Are they giving lip service to say, yeah, we can just follow that information, or we can pass that information on, or are they truly integrating? So you really have to be careful when you're looking at systems. We tend to complicate things because everybody's looking to gain an advantage with their system, for their system to be superior. So we're adding benefits and features and things like that on systems that maybe people aren't looking for, but it adds complexity to it. And we need to make sure when you do that, that you're not sort of then moving away from compliance whilst doing that.
Okay, because what you just described is the CDM regulations, isn't it?
That's correct.
And compliance is what comes out of CDM. You have to have CDM first, because then you know who you're talking to. And then the assumption has to be, and maybe it has to be absolutely out there and stated, that the system that is designed is a compliant system.
That's correct. And it moves on from that as well, because then you have to think about whatever you think, whatever system you decide to employ in your project or building, you've got to think of not just compliance at the time of handover. You have to think about compliance then for the whole life term of that system, if you like, for the use of that building. So there's the element of picking the right product, making sure it's compliant, putting the system in, having a system commissioned, making sure it's all handed over correctly and all the correct training is given and the correct support is given to the end user, so they get that full benefit to ensure they can use the system, get the full value out of it. But you have to make sure that using a system that you can use. So say somebody says over 10 years, over a 10-year period, you will save X amount of pounds by having this type of system. It will do X, Y, and Z for you. You need to make sure that the end user then can actually realize those savings and realize the value and get the information out of it over that period of time. So it's not just the time of install or even the time of purchase. You're looking at the use of the building, because ultimately that's what we're there for, is to give somebody a system that helps them to be compliant whilst they're using that building.
Yeah, and our concern is that we've got here a life safety system which is not owned by anyone. We've talked about grudge purchases before, and sort of the time it takes to create an emergency system is whittled down because no one wants it. It's always an add-on. It's always who's doing the emergency lighting. This is insane, isn't it? Because of the implications of that. But who do we go and tug on the shirt sleeve of? Is it the architect? Is it the main contractor? How the hell we get to client bodies? I've never worked that one out, unless you've got a very, very big estate and you can go, it's his name on the door, her name on the door. We can go and talk to them.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, no one's picking up that baton.
Yeah, things are slightly changing. People are becoming more aware now. You're absolutely right. Historically, emergency lighting was like an afterthought. You think of lighting, general lighting or mains lighting, however you want to refer to it, as the key component for lighting your building. And then all of a sudden someone go, we need emergency lighting. How are we going to fit that in or shoehorn that into the project? And then, of course, nobody's really thought about the budget for that. So then it's, what's the lowest possible cost solution for getting that into the project? I think people people's mindset is changing. And again, I mentioned it on the previous podcast, it's through education. I think people like ourselves and podcasts like this and of others, it's all about educating those people, all those key stakeholders, all the way from the architect all the way through to the end user and everybody in between, to ensure that they're asking the right questions when they're looking at it. So for instance, if you're looking to specify a product for a client, like I mentioned before, what's in their spec? What are they actually looking for? And is the system you're considering going to answer all those questions they're asking or deliver on their specification? Then when the install contractor comes along, they need to then ask the question, well, if I install it in this way, this part of the system's going to be compromised. So is it easy? Is it simple? Does the contractor think it's going to do what they think it's going to do? Are they aware? Are they asking questions? Then the end user, when they have the system handed over, are they actually receiving what they requested? So again, just like it is for compliance, it's the same when you're looking at a system. It's all about having a good level of communication, liaising with all the key stakeholders. So for instance, a specifier may look at a product in a brochure and think somebody needs an automatic test system for emergency lighting. There's a number of manufacturers. That one seems okay. I've used these guys before. This one seems interesting. Maybe have a meeting with a sales representative from that particular company. But we must realize at the time they're only looking at the top layer. They're not looking in depth to see what they actually will get. So maybe ask the question now, with technology moving on, can I have a demonstration of that system? What will the system actually deliver? Can I have a look at a test report to see what that looks like? Does the system cover maintenance reports? And can I look at that and see what that looks like? Am I then going to deliver a system that's compliant with all the relevant regulations? But when the end user receives it, are they going to be able to use it effectively? Do we need somebody who's a tech boffin to be able to do the most simplest tasks, or will I have to pay for somebody to come in to support that system if they just want to reconfigure something? Or is it going to be easily supported, delivered? People talk about intuitive software. If you speak to everybody, their software is intuitive, right? Okay, nobody says it's complex, but is it truly? Let people have a look at it, have a play of it. Can an end user add and delete a luminaire, for instance, change a test group? Is it really going to be exactly what the client wants? So I think from a specifier point of view, they can probably ask those questions, ask for a demonstration, maybe a demonstration with a client or even just themselves. Then the contractor, sit down with the contractor and say, this is how you need to install this system. So working with a manufacturer or a vendor who can give that support and say, right, you're going to install this system. I need to make sure you understand exactly what you need to do that effectively and so that the system hands over complete. So it's dealing with the right people who can give that level of support, I believe.
Is there also an issue about what it's for? I mean, escape lighting. We get escape lighting. We also get, if the damn building is on fire, you want to get people out of the building, unless, of course, you've got the stay put policy, in which case you don't want them, you certainly do not want them trying to get out of the building. Yeah. But there's more to it than that, isn't it? Because all we're talking about is replacing lighting when the power's out. And the power can be out for any number of reasons. Maybe people go through their entire lives and never experience this. First time I ever experienced it is my only trip to Venice in February, and we walked into our hotel room and Venice went dark, the entire city. Right, wow. And you sort of like this around the room. You open, you realise you've got curtains, a window. You open it and there's no difference. It's just as dark outside as it is inside. Yeah. We've had that down here. The main substation in Yeovil went down one night. Nothing to do with the houses, nothing to do with the buildings, nothing to do with the people. Everybody. In fact, there's more risk to health and well-being by trying to get out because you can't see steps. It can so be. So I wonder: are we even in a place where? We've done this by default. We've gone. We can't afford to have no light, so we need some escape lighting, and that's fine. And then we've stopped it at that. But we know that there are ideas about if it's only a power failure, if there is no indication that there is a risk to life by staying in a building, why are we designing a system just to get people out of a building? People might be perfectly safe sat at a desk, or in a department store, or in a hotel.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it's a good point you raised, because when people look at emergency lighting, especially those who probably aren't giving it enough attention or focus. I think it's because in their mind, they're sat there thinking, well, how often is there going to be a fire in this building and I'm going to need emergency lighting? Emergency lighting is not just needed when there's a fire. It can be any sort of power outage. Emergency lighting is moving on and evolving now when we start looking at the world of, depends on how people phrase this, but adaptive dynamic signage systems. So there may be power, there may not be a fire, but there may be a need to evacuate. And people need to be able to see to evacuate. There could be areas of the building that need that emergency lighting or even directional signs to get people out of a building safely. So people only think of the extreme element because it's related to fire safety. They think, well, we only need emergency lighting when there's a fire. And, you know, people have managed buildings for many years and say, I've never known a fire in this building. And, you know, what's the chances of that happening? And again, you could just losing power, say, in a stairwell where there's no natural or borrowed light. And imagine trying to negotiate down a complex staircase without any lighting. So it's not just when there's a fire, it's any need to move around a building if there's no mains lighting present. So if you look at the standards, you know, for self-contained luminaires, it's got to be wired off the same circuit for the mains luminaires because it needs to operate when their mains luminaires have lost their power. The same with central battery systems. You need to monitor those circuits to make sure they operate at that time.
And this really comes down to system design because, I mean, let's face it, one of the answers in a high-rise building is not to try and get people out from the 30th floor, is to make them safe on the 30th floor. And that suggests something like a fireproof panic room on every floor, which will need signage, which will need a strategy, and it'll need air handling, and it'll need proper system design, including the work that you and I do.
Yeah.
Someone has to take charge of that.
Yeah, and it's like I said before, you know, these are all valid points, and people don't tend to discuss them openly, and you're absolutely right. So when you bring in all these competent people around the table, it's not just they're competent about emergency lighting, I'll speak to them in a silo over here, then we need this guy who does, I don't know, smoke extraction over here. It's bringing all of that together for a fire safety strategy. So people will possibly use a specialist, you know, a fire safety engineer or something like that to help bring all those different elements together to give a system which is safe and compliant. You know, you don't just have emergency lighting on its own, you don't just have fire extraction on its own, you don't have fire detection on its own. These things all work together.
Would you, we've just done our 15 minutes. Who'd have thought?
Time flies.
Would it be worthwhile? I'm asking you, I mean, tell me no, but would it be worthwhile for the next time we get together in a month or so's time to actually sort of try and see if we can build a sort of a checklist, a worksheet that goes and let's say that we're talking to an architect. This is what you need to ask. These are the things that need to happen, because the thing that pops out at the end is a building that is or isn't fit for purpose.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think we should look at that. Yeah, to try and to try and make people realise all the different hurdles or all the different points or links in the chain that need to be connected together.
Okay, we'll do that.
Okay.
I think that's going to be done in early April, maybe something like that. I think is the one on the schedule, isn't it?
No problem.
Steve, thank you very much. Thank you all for watching and for listening. I hope this has been valuable. If you are engaged in any kind of emergency lighting design and you've got the ear of an architect, a client, a main contractor, in fact, anybody on the damn project who needs to know this stuff, make sure that they watch this podcast. Oh, and the next one. Steve, I'll catch up with you soon.
Will do. Thank you very much. Right.